Tonight on Wolf Blitzer Reports, target terrorism. As Defense Secretary Rumsfeld wraps up a tour of anti-terror allies, Uzbekistan offers the use of an airbase. And British Prime Minister Tony Blair helps firm up support in Pakistan. Israel warns it won't be the odd man out. The White House warns that Americans must expect casualties, while Congress has warned that another terror attack is virtually certain. With an unusual case of anthrax raising concerns, should the U.S. go nuclear in response to biological or chemical attacks? I'll ask former Clinton National Security Advisor Samuel Berger, and we'll look at the latest eye in the sky as America targets terrorism. Good evening. Welcome to our viewers in the United States and around the world. I'm Wolf Blitzer reporting tonight from Washington. Let's begin with a look at the latest developments. Armed National Guard troops are stepping up patrols at some of the nation's busiest airports. For the first time since World War II, troops took up posts at Newark International Airport today, where one of the hijacked planes originated from. This as the FAA's head of security stepped down. A Florida man infected with an extremely rare and lethal form of anthrax has died.
As far as we know, this is an isolated case. For sure, here at JFK Medical Center, there are no other cases under suspicion or being investigated at this time.
In hopes of boosting the nation's sluggish economy, President Bush is urging Congress to pass new tax cuts equal or greater to the amount earmarked for disaster recovery. American troops are deploying in Uzbekistan next door to Afghanistan as the U.S. military moves into Osama bin Laden's neighborhood. This follows Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld's efforts to cement a new partnership in the war against terrorism. Let's go live to the Pentagon and CNN national correspondent Bob Franken for details. Bob?
And Wolf, Secretary Rumsfeld heading back to the United States after 3 days in what we know as the region. The last stop was Turkey, erstwhile NATO ally, nevertheless a country that does have disputes between its secular and Muslim factions in that country. For consultations there, he had come from Uzbekistan, which was probably the most significant stop. Uzbekistan, the former Soviet republic, which will now receive U.S. troops, about 1,000 members of the Mountain Division on their way to one air base at the moment for use only for humanitarian and search and rescue purposes, but a promise that this role might be expanded if a combat role is needed. Uzbekistan, of course, borders on Afghanistan. He was throughout the region. He visited, he being Rumsfeld, visited Egypt, Oman, and Saudi Arabia. Different countries, different issues.
We recognize that every country has its own circumstance. It has its own neighborhood, it has its own history, and each country will make a judgment as to the kinds of ways that it can be helpful in dealing with the problem of international terrorism.
So as Rumsfeld returns to the United States, he will take part in high-level administration discussions. Clearly, Wolf, with his trip to the region, the United States is closer to finalizing its military planning. Wolf?
And Bob, it's almost 4 weeks now since the September 11th attack. I take it you and some cameras were allowed to see some of the damage over at the Pentagon. Tell us what you saw.
Well, we saw an area, of course, that is nowhere near the appearance of devastation that it was on September 11th when a plane crashed into it, but we're seeing an area that had massive damage, and officials told us that the damage was worse than they thought. As a matter of fact, there are still fractures that are appearing every day, even as they continue to make repairs, and what they originally thought would be a $250 million repair is now going to be up to $500 to $700 million. They're hoping to have everything done within the next year, but it is a program, it is a situation that is even worse than they originally thought. And of course, well, they still have not found the remains of many of the victims there.
Bob Franken at the Pentagon, thank you very much. On a coalition-building trip of his own, British Prime Minister Tony Blair says Pakistan has made the right move in lining up against terrorism. I spoke earlier with CNN senior international correspondent Walter Rogers in Islamabad. Walter, tell us what happened in this important meeting between Prime Minister Blair and President Musharraf.
Wolf, almost within shouting distance of Afghanistan, Britain's Prime Minister Tony Blair once again showed he is the heavyweight of the Western alliance. He reissued an ultimatum to the Taliban, telling them turn over Osama bin Laden or you, the Taliban, will become a legitimate target. Tony Blair also said the Afghan people are not the enemy, and he reminded the world that the West quarrel is not with Afghanistan, but merely with Osama bin Laden. He emerged from the meeting with President Musharraf of Pakistan, Mr. Blair signaling that it's a whole new ballgame in this part of the world.
The 11th of September has changed the world. Nations make their choices as to whether they will help in the fight against international terrorism or stand aside. I believe that Pakistan has made the right choice. The result will be a significant and lasting strengthening of the outside world's relations with Pakistan. We in Britain will play our full part. We will not walk away, neither will others.
Mr. Blair, in saying we will not walk away, was making it very clear the United States, Britain, and the West will play a major role in reshaping a new Afghanistan, pouring aid into there, and making sure that the new Afghan government is very broadly based and hopefully democratic. What is not clear, however, is how all of this will shake out with the other players in the region, Russia, India, China, and Iran itself. Wolf?
Walter, when we spoke 24 hours ago, you said a key sign of the reaction inside Pakistan would be after the Friday prayers. What happened on the streets of Pakistan today?
Well, as we anticipated, there would be demonstrations, but that's pretty usual after Friday prayers at the mosques here. The big demonstration was Rawalpindi. That's not very far from Islamabad, the capital of Pakistan. This demonstration was sponsored by the JUI party, a radical Islamist party. We shouldn't read too much into it. That party only controls 15% of the seats in the Pakistani parliament. That being the case, these people were really out there muscle flexing, trying to signal their president, Mr. Musharraf, that they're not all that happy with the new friendship that he's developing with the United States and the West. The ultimate test, however, is going to be not after Friday prayers, but after the Pakistanis see the extent of the American strikes against Afghanistan when and if they come. Then the equation changes in this part of the world, and no one knows what the shape of this part of the world will be if indeed there are American strikes. Wolf?
Walter Rogers in Islamabad, thank you very much.